Coming up next on KPBS Evening Edition, more San Diegans head to the food bank as middle-class wages continue to fall in California. What can the city do to put more money in their pockets? We'll talk to an economist.
And San Diego's new downtown library is still short millions of dollars. We'll ask one of the library's top fundraisers what happens if it doesn't raise the money. KPBS Evening Edition starts now.
Hello, thanks for joining us. I'm Joanne Farian.
And I'm Dwayne Brown. We begin tonight with sirens sounding an alert at the San Onofre nuclear power plant. It happened at 2:50 this afternoon. The San Diego County Office of Emergency Services says it was related to the release of gas at the plant. That gas turned out to be an ammonia leak. County officials say current conditions do not threaten public safety. Southern California Edison says the leak was in the steam system used to drive the plant's turbines. Employees working near the leak were evacuated, but others continued to work, and the power plant remained online.
A San Diego Unified Schools trustee says he wants more time before officially presenting a budget plan to the rest of the school board. Scott Barnett announced the plan yesterday. He's proposing a 10% cut in salaries, putting off teacher pay raises, making employees pay for health plans other than Kaiser, and a $50 parcel tax. He says that if voters approve the tax, the pay cuts can be rescinded within 6 months. The San Diego Education Association, the teachers union, says the plan is a gun held to the heads of teachers. They say to fill a budget hole that no one will know exists until January of 2012 at the soonest. The truth is that there are 13 California districts that have received a negative fiscal certification and 97 districts that received a qualified fiscal certification last spring. But San Diego Unified is not one of them. Barnett says he wants more time to study district finances before presenting his plan.
The California Coastal Commission could revisit an issue it first considered 20 years ago. Tomorrow, the commission is set to take another look at the Navy Broadway complex. KPBS Metro reporter Katie Orr joins us with more from the news center. So, Katie, what exactly is the Coastal Commission considering this time around?
Well, Dwayne, the Coastal Commission first approved a new San Diego headquarters for the Navy in 1991. Since then, the project has stalled, though it's picked up some steam recently. And Coastal Commission staff wants the commission to take another look at it because it says a lot has changed in 20 years, and staff would like to see some modifications made to the project.
And Katie, remind us why this issue is so important for the city of San Diego.
Well, this is an important military installation for the city. It brings a lot of jobs and money to the region. It also plays an important part in San Diego's Bayfront waterfront because it's part of the North Embarcadero Visionary Plan, or it's along that pathway. The port has been trying to remake the waterfront. The commission says in the past 20 years, views towards the waterfront have changed. People want more open space. They want more access. The Commission staff would like to see the project modified to incorporate some of those changes. However, parts of this project are still involved in litigation, so it could be a while before we see anything happen with this project.
Okay, KPBS Metro reporter Katie Orr.
The city of Escondido has hired forensic accountants to look at the books for the California Center for the Arts. The center was $232,000 in the red last year, and the city's trying to learn whether the deficit is even bigger than that. The center's new interim chief executive says the previous administration may have done shoddy bookkeeping.
The newest business plan for California's high-speed rail system says the cost has risen to nearly $100 billion over 20 years. When voters first approved the idea in 2008, the estimated cost was $43 billion. The new report assumes the line will be complete from San Francisco to Anaheim by the year 2033. It also assumes private investment will cover roughly 20% of the cost. The proposed line includes 3 stops here in San Diego County.
Marines heading to Afghanistan next year are preparing for a changing role in the region. KPBS reporter Allison St. John talked with the commander taking over the Marines in Helmand Province. She has more from the news center. Allison, the new commander has experience in Iraq, but things are different in Afghanistan. How are the Marines preparing for that changing role?
Well, Major General Charles Gurganus, who is taking over the 1st Marine Expeditionary Force out of Camp Pendleton, is leaving probably next February to take over in March. And he is talking about preparing the Marines for a changing role as the numbers decline in Afghanistan. He's saying that the training will continue to include combat training, how to deal with IEDs, but their role as advisors is going to become increasingly important. So that will be reflected in the training that's being done both at Camp Pendleton and at 29 Palms.
We know, Allison, that the president just recently announced that all troops from Iraq will be home by the end of the year. Do we know what the timeline is then for Afghanistan?
Well, 2014 is when they're supposed to be out, and the general was not quite clear about how fast those numbers would be drawn down. Right now, there are between 18 and 20,000 Marines in Afghanistan. About half of those are from Camp Pendleton, and possibly 2,000 will be withdrawn this year. But next year, it's unclear how fast that drawdown will occur. But it will definitely affect their role. They won't be able to take the lead as much in combat operations. They'll have to take a step back and really work with the Afghans to take the lead.
KPBS reporter Allison St. John.
Food insecurity is becoming more severe in San Diego County. Over the past several weeks, I've told you about the backpack program filled with food for kids who come to school hungry after a long weekend. We learned 4 out of 10 seniors in the county are struggling to feed themselves, while military families on tight budgets are suffering a similar plight. Today, a major food donor got a helping hand for its annual food drive. What looks like a barrel full of canned goods is really a lifeline for people who can't afford to buy it. Organizers of the annual holiday food drive are hoping you'll take notice and drop a few items off when you see one of these around town. Although the San Diego economy is gradually recovering, many people are left behind. In fact, 1 out of 7 in the county is living below the poverty level. So the annual food drive is more important than ever.
First place goes to San Diego State University, who collected a whopping 2 billion pounds of food. Oh, actually, it was 54,526 pounds of food. The mayor says he's proud of how young people are stepping up to help others in need. San Diego State won the annual College Rocks Hunger Award. Thank you very much. For gathering the most donations of any campus in the county.
We had no idea that 4 years later, the need would be almost double what it was in 2007 when we started this very aggressive food drive in San Diego. And it's the folks next door to you, it's folks you do not even believe. It is military families that are on Miramar that also need that same helping hand. So that's what's important today, and we all need to step up and meet the challenge.
Now, for more on the economic perspective on this story, Joanne is joined by a guest at the Evening Edition Roundtable.
As Dwayne showed you earlier, the Food Bank's holiday drive began today, but the need has been increasing for the past few years, an obvious reflection of the economy. We'll talk with a San Diego economist about that in just a moment, but first, take a look at these numbers. The number of people served by the food bank every month increased from about 200,000 in 2008 to over 350,000 in 2011. And a new report by the California Budget Project, a nonpartisan research group focused on low and middle income issues, came out with some numbers of their own today. Numbers that show the middle class losing ground while the top 1% increased their income. The average adjusted gross income of the top 1% increased in the past 2 decades from $778,000 to $1.2 million, while the average adjusted gross income of the middle income earners, well, that went down from about $41,000 to $35,000. Joining me to talk about how San Diegans are trying to make ends meet these days is Dr. Lynn Reeser, Chief Economist at Point Loma Nazarene University. Dr. Reeser, thanks for being here.
Good evening.
First, paint a picture for us of what's happening to the middle class in San Diego.
Well, the middle class certainly has been affected by the recession. Everyone has been impacted, been affected by the decline in housing prices, some of the losses in their 401k plans, and also in the last year, the rise in food and gas prices. And yet we see some improvement. We are finally adding more jobs in San Diego County, and I think over the next 5 years, most San Diegans will see some improvement.
We've seen in the past several weeks a lot of focus on income disparity, as the numbers I just pointed to also point out Occupy movement across the country. But is that should that be our focus right now about the disparity, or what should we be focused on in terms of looking at the big economic picture?
Well, first of all, as we look at these numbers, it's not necessarily the same people that we're tracking over time. For instance, back in 1987, the various lowest end of the income distribution were often immigrants or young people, and 20 years later, as they gained more work experience and education, many of them moved up the income ladder. And I think it's also important not to focus unduly on the income inequality, but to focus on how do we make our economy grow, make everyone better off, and then also give particular help to those people who need extra education, more job training, more skill sets.
So can local governments play a role in having impact on how we bring up incomes?
Yes, local governments can help. One, they can partner with the private sector and also with the education system so that we have this connection. Companies looking for skilled workers, that we have schools providing those types of education and training programs. And second, local government can provide the economic climate that fosters and encourages new businesses to start up and new businesses to grow and existing companies to expand. And that means providing a friendly business climate without undue hassling and bureaucracy and permitting processes.
When we look at San Diego County now, do we have a bit of a gap in terms of what we need with the trained workforce and what we actually have in terms of who's graduating?
All over the country there is basically a skills mismatch, and here in San Diego, for example, we have 6,000 software engineering jobs that can't find qualified applicants. So we do have that skills problem. There is going to be, I think, a tremendous demand for engineers in the next decade, healthcare workers, and we will need a wide variety of skill levels in this county.
Now, you're involved with the San Diego Food Bank, bringing attention to this issue. Who ends up at the food bank? Is it the middle class that we keep hearing about? Is it sort of the poor? We know that the numbers are increasing. Who's actually there getting food?
Well, no longer is it just the homeless situation and also people chronically unemployed, but it has reached into the middle class. Many people who have kept their jobs or have seen their wages not keep pace with food prices and other costs, people who have seen medical issues in their families, people who had to take pay cuts to be employed, and also the military. So we've seen definitely the scope of food people needing help expand significantly.
We know the food bank expects increased demand over the holiday season, but in terms of the economic forecast, you've got some numbers that point in a bit of a positive direction, though, don't they?
The good news here is that we will have the capacity to help people who have been left behind in this economic recovery. We expect to see the addition of maybe 18,000 to 20,000 jobs this year in San Diego County. That will be about 4 times the number we created last year. Still, we have a long ways to go to bring down that 10% jobless rate, but at least we're starting to make some headway.
Dr. Lynn Reeser, thanks for being here.
Thank you.
San Diego's new downtown library is under construction, but a lot of money still has to be raised to pay for it. In a moment, we'll talk with the man in charge of doing just that. And from salt ponds to seawater refuge, we'll show you how a South Bay estuary is being rehabilitated. This is KPBS Evening Edition.
Tonight on KPBS at 8, an affectionate portrait of one of America's most beloved entertainers, whose career spanned from vaudeville to TV and film, Bob Hope, Hollywood's brightest star. Then at 9 on Part 2 of D-Day to Berlin, the behind-the-scenes battles between commanders and the terrible winter conflicts during the Battle of the Bulge. And at 10, from network newsrooms to the U.S. Senate, a look back to the anthrax scare of 2001 on Frontline. That's tonight on KPBS.
In the last year, KPBS News has been honored with nearly 3 dozen awards. I'm extremely proud of these honors, and I thank you for your support as we continue to serve our local communities with award-winning news coverage in the years to come.
I'm Gwen Eiffel on the next News Hour. An update on the bipartisan congressional committee tackling the nation's deficit. That's Tuesday on the PBS News Hour.
KPBS Evening Edition is made possible by Joan and Erwin Jacobs and by
Commercial salt ponds have operated in San Diego's South Bay since the 1950s, with 3 levees separating the area from the rest of the bay. Now, the estuary is being reborn. KPBS environment reporter Ed Joyce gives us a look.
For more than 50 years, a 200-acre section of South San Diego Bay was cut off from the rest of the bay, choking the natural tidal flow. But now, that's all changing.
We're at the far south end of San Diego Bay. We're on the San Diego Bay National Wildlife Refuge. And in the last 2 months, as part of the restoration project, we've cut open the levee that separated these ponds from San Diego Bay.
And once the tidal flow started returning, so did thousands of birds, fish, and other wildlife.
So essentially you've restored this section of the flats from the salt activity to more of a living, vibrant, natural seawater habitat.
Right, by reconnecting them, it really let fish move back into the ponds freely, migrate back and forth, and create the conditions where we're going to get large numbers of shorebirds and seabirds moving into this area.
A few months after the levees were breached, egrets, sanderlings, pelicans, herons, marbled godwits, and other birds were flocking to the revitalized marsh habitat. To get a closer look at the South San Diego Bay Restoration Project, we're going to take a trip on this boat.
So we're now following some of these channels that we cut in here in Pond 10, and as the tide rises, these exposed mud flats will get covered over, and some of these areas you can see we've head started with cordgrass, and the idea is that this will be an area where the cordgrass will take root and then expand over time and become habitat for the endangered light-footed clapper rail.
Adding the new salt marsh vegetation provides a welcome home for the endangered clapper rail. Much of the bird's natural habitat has been swallowed by development and urban growth.
Hi.
Holly Henderson is one of several people wading waist and chest deep in mud to plant plugs of cordgrass.
So what we just planted here is we have 10 plots of cordgrass that are going to be study plots for the next several seasons of growth. And so this is the 7th one we've put in today, and we have a total of 10 that we're doing. And they're in pretty muddy areas, as you can see.
So you're knee-deep in this?
Yeah, knee-deep's pretty good. Sometimes we have to crawl, and we use the black buckets as sleds, kind of, to push us through. So we put plants in them, and then you kind of crawl through and do your planting.
Biologist Chris Norby, a project consultant, has watched the area come to life.
This is a new depression that's forming that way, and a circular, semicircular feature right here goes around and comes out up there. So that's all happened in 5 weeks. This was all essentially a level marsh plain, and now it's already starting to show some diversity in the topography. So it's pretty exciting.
There's still more work to do before the project is finished, but the work so far by humans and nature has already brought life back to this portion of San Diego Bay.
That was KPBS environment reporter Ed Joyce. The restoration work cost nearly $8 million and is part of a larger project in the South Bay.
The San Diego Public Library Foundation is still millions short of its $32 million goal. The foundation has to raise the money by January in order to keep construction on track for the new downtown library. Foundation leaders say they'll meet that goal, but critics aren't so sure. Joining me is Mel Katz, chair of the San Diego Foundation. Thanks, Mel, for being here.
Thank you.
So tell us, how much money have you raised so far?
Of that $32.5 million, we've raised $7 million, and that's signed pledges, and we're still working to raise the other 32, the rest of that money. And we've had great response. Right now, when we take donors to take a look at the project, they can actually see that it's out of the ground and 6 of the 10 floors are completely done. So you get to walk in and see what this amazing project's going to look like.
We've got some numbers up on our screen for our audience. I just want to break them down, though, quickly before we move on to about what the new library is going to look like. I know you're excited about it, but if we can let our audience at home know. So $7 million pledge funds, but you've got $16 million now in prospective pledges. What does that mean?
That means that we've taken 48 different people on a tour, and they've been so impressed and are talking with us right now. They're talking to their families, they're talking to their estate planners, and we think conservatively we're going to get another $16 million in addition to the 7 from those people.
That still takes us to $23 million, $9.5 million left to go. How are you going to get that money?
Those people that we're talking to are not even the major naming people. So like if you want your name on the library, it's $20 million. The lobby or the reading room is $10 million. The auditorium is $15 million. That's a whole different set of people that we're talking to.
So let's remind the people at home how this library really got its support. Break down the financing for us in terms of how much of the $185 million cost is public and how much is private.
Sure. Roughly $65 million is private dollars. So what we've done is broken it into 2 phases. Phase 1 is the core, the steel structure and so on, and the outside shell. And that's $154 million. 80 was from redevelopment, 20 was from the state, and 20 was from the school district, and then 32.4 was private dollars. And now we're raising another $32.5 million.
Now, what happens if you don't reach this goal by January?
It's so interesting. You know, last June, the City Council voted to go ahead with this project, and there were all these naysayers out there that said, you're never going to reach it, this project's never going to happen. Well, we did. We raised that $32.4 million in private dollars, and the City Council voted to go ahead, and this shovel-ready project started by the end of July, putting people to work right away.
But what happens now? It's November. What happens if you don't get to $32.5 million?
If we don't, and we run out of money, we'll have to, halt the project with just the core being done and just the shell being done until we raise the rest. But we are so confident that we're going to raise it, and that come January, we're going to be there with the same amount of supporters, all there thanking us and our donors for the amount for this project.
Earlier on the show, we talked about the increased need at the food bank. We had a local economist on. This is a bad time, as everybody knows out there. Is this the time to be asking people for more money to build a project? What actually Carl DeMaio has called this a vanity project. Is this the right time to be building something of this magnitude?
Our libraries, and in San Diego we have 35 libraries, our libraries are being used today more than ever. People are using them to take out books, rent DVDs and CDs, to look for a job. It's not a vanity project. It is used and used all the time. So interesting. There was a study by the Gates Foundation, and it showed that 1/3 of all Americans use their library computer to get on the internet. And if you break that down to kids, 14 to 18-year-olds, 50% use the library computer to get on the internet.
Before we go, Mel, we don't have a lot of time, but if you do raise the money, the library gets built, who pays for the operating costs?
For the first 5 years, 2 families have come forward to give us $1 million a year each to cover the operating costs. The biggest thing about this project, it's not going to use any general fund dollars, not to build it, and not to operate it.
We'll have to leave it there, but we'll have you back in January. You can let us know how it all went. Mel
to celebrate?
We'll talk to you in January. Mel,
Perfect.
Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you.
A recap of tonight's top stories and more of your thoughts about Occupy San Diego in just a moment. This is KPBS Evening Edition.
Meet a man who was crazy enough to think he could change the world. And did. Steve Jobs, One Last Thing. Wednesday, November 2nd at 10, only on PBS.
Hi, I'm Elsa Sevilla. If you find yourself hearing about a great program on KPBS after it's already aired, we have a solution. Get notified about your favorite TV programs on KPBS before they air by subscribing to the TV Highlights email alert. This daily email will feature the best programs coming up right here on KPBS TV, so you can make a date to tune in or plan to record it. It's easy to register. Just go to kpbs.org/alerts.
Welcome back to the Public Square on KPBS Evening Edition. I want to update you on the Occupy San Diego protest at the Civic Center Plaza. Today, protesters were criticized by public speakers before the San Diego City Council. A hot dog vendor who rents space at the plaza says not only has his business suffered, but he has videotape of the protesters partying all night and sleeping all day. Protesters also asked Council for a resolution of support, but for the second consecutive week, Council did not put such a resolution on their agenda. Well, last week, we asked you whether the Occupy protest was a young person's movement or whether you would join if you could. I want to share Maggie's response, where she dubbed herself the old curmudgeon. Now, she tells me she's over 70 and retired, and she sympathizes with nearly all of the protesters' demands. She also says, I believe the rich should be taxed at the Eisenhower level, 90%. In short, I am probably more radical than most of the protesters. I will join if and when my health permits. Thank you, Maggie, for that comment. You can weigh in on the conversation by following us on Twitter, liking us on Facebook, and of course, you can email us. That's at news@kpbs.org. And now, Dwayne has a recap of our top stories.
An ammonia leak set off an emergency sirens at the San Onofre nuclear power plant this afternoon. The County Office of Emergency Services says there was no danger to the public. A San Diego Unified trustee is holding off on his proposal to trim the district's budget. Scott Barnett says he wants more time to study the district's finances before presenting his plan to the rest of the school board. You can watch and comment on any of the stories you saw tonight on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. Thanks for joining us. Before we go to the forecast, we want you to know there's a red flag warning up for 3 a.m. in the morning for all of San Diego County mountains and inland valleys. Have a great night.